Welcome and welcome back. Here's the project we're working on in this video. It's an end table, a side table, for a sofa or a couch in your living room. It's a simple design, but I think it's elegantly simple. So before we get into this project, firstly, I just wanted to say I am so grateful for all of you. Our last build video did 16,000 views and gained us 1,000 subscribers, over 1,000 subscribers. And for where we're at right now, that is huge, and I am so grateful for that. So thank you so much for the support there. So getting back to this project here, I was inspired from somebody on Instagram who unfortunately I don't remember, and I tried looking for who it was, but I couldn't find it. But this person was somebody who made drums, and he was making a floor tom, and basically just made a giant segmented glue up and then turned it into a cylinder. And I thought, man, that's a pretty cool idea. Maybe one day I'll make a drum. And then recently I just had the idea, you know what, we can make a cool little end table out of that. So first things first, like in any project, it starts with the milling. Now I rough ripped these boards down and I'm running them through the planer on edge. And the reason for that is to get a very consistent, specific width so that the cylinder turns out to the size that I need. And then we're going to set our blade to the correct angle that we need and then go through and rip all of our boards, both edges, to put that angle on them. Now to find this angle, there's a bunch of different websites. Just look up wood segmented calculator to get the angle. But in short, the theory is you take the number of segments you want and you divide 360 by that. So we had 15 segments. So 360 divided by 15 is 24. And then you're going to have two cuts on each side of the board. So you take that 24 divided by 2. And that is the angle that you'll need to put on both edges of your board. Add that all up, you get 360 degrees because there are 360 degrees in a circle. Now this honestly was probably the most difficult part of this project. And it's just one of those things you find out as you start a new process. Just flipping this thing over while trying to keep all of the pieces still taped together. Man, it was, like I said, probably the most difficult part of this project. And like with anything new, there's going to be a learning curve and things you got to figure out along the way. And, that's just a part of the process. Now, when I originally had this design in mind, I wanted to make it more complex than it ended up being. I wanted to add some sort of drawer in it that would, seamlessly work with the cylinder. Or my final design I was kind of really going for was to have the top of this kind of pivot and open to reveal a nice finished cavity inside that you could store things, a TV remote or whatever you might need. But the more I thought about that, kind of two things came to mind. Number one, that adds a bunch more labor and design and thought into the project. Now, that is not a bad thing by any means. I think, pushing yourself to make things complex and figure complex problems out is great. But with more complexity comes more cost. Now, this project isn't for anyone in particular, but I want to design furniture that is somewhat affordable, as much as a custom piece could be affordable, but adding a bunch of extra bells and whistles that aren't necessarily needed just kind of drives up cost. Now, if somebody wanted this with a drawer or with that cavity in it, of course I would make it for them. Now, like I said earlier, I was going to struggle again, and this time I had to take a break after just getting it on edge because it was difficult. Now, I did all this to eventually do a dry fit, especially because this is the first time I did that, and we ended up with this gap here. So unfortunately, we had to untape everything, adjust the angle by literally 1/4 of a degree, and recut it all, and to get it right. And, it has to be right. Otherwise, there's going to be an ugly gap there in the final product. Now, my second point on why I chose to make this project more simple than I could have was, I think with more storage space and more surface area comes the natural response to fill that space. And I think that's especially true in American culture and just any culture that is more materialistic than others. One thing, for example, my wife is from Mexico, and visiting her family in their homes, they build all of their homes out of cinder block there. It's not like in the US where we have stick frame houses. It's just a different building style. But with stick frame houses in the US, you have things like attics, things like crawl spaces under your house, just places to put things. Whereas in Mexico, with these cinder block houses, they look just as great, but they don't have these storage areas. And I think that's actually a good thing because in America, we tend to fill up spaces if we can. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody, but it's definitely something that I think is noticeable. Now, that doesn't correlate to the economic status of the culture, I don't think, because in Mexico, they just have less decoration. Like for Christmas here in the States, I growing up had an attic full of decorations for every holiday. In Mexico, that's just not the case because you just only have so much space in your home and you don't have a big attic to fill stuff with. So similarly in furniture, I think, if things like a table has a secret drawer in it, you're going to put stuff in that drawer. If a desk has so many drawers, you're going to fill up every single one of those drawers. If your desk has no drawers, then you're going to make the space look beautiful and work with no drawers. And in turn, that means less stuff and less clutter. And I think designing furniture that keeps that in mind is appealing to me because stuff is just stuff, and eventually you acquire too much stuff without even knowing it, and you have all these places to put all this stuff, and really you don't need this stuff. So if you didn't have a place to put the stuff in the first place, then you wouldn't have that stuff, stuff like that, if that makes sense. But the key of this project here was doing this. Like I said, I got this inspiration from somebody on Instagram who makes drums. Again, sorry, can't remember who it was. But basically just made this big lathe. Also, somebody said this was a rotary mill. That makes sense in terminology, though I'm not sure what the correct terminology would be. But pretty similar to a lathe, you got 2 points of contact to rotate a piece along. And then instead of a lathe chisel or something like that, I have a track or sled that my router rides along, and I manually spin the piece and slowly push the router all the way to the end until we have this thing turn into a cylinder. Now, this was remarkably easy, and I say that because I honestly thought that this part of the project was going to give me the most trouble, but honestly, like I said, it was the easiest thing. Yeah, I had to make this new tool, but it was pretty simple to make, and I think anybody could figure it out just by looking at it. But yeah, I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was, but it was actually pretty fun, and definitely look forward to using this for future projects. I've already got a few projects in mind that we might use this for, but after a bunch of rotating and routing and rotating and sanding, we eventually got this off of the rotary mill. I guess that's what we're calling it. And you can see the end caps of how this was held on there. Being that it was a polygon, or the inside still is a polygon, we can reference those flat spots of the polygon to keep this piece rotating nicely. Now, unfortunately, one edge of the table did not line up. Luckily, we had one end that was completely flat, so we were able to reference that off of a flat surface like the workbench here, perch the router up, and just use a straight bit and continually rotate it eventually until the surface was flat. At this point in the project, I still wasn't sure of which direction I wanted to go. Did I want to add a storage element, a drawer, or a hidden cavity to put things in, or did I want to just keep it simple and do a top? Halfway through this project, was the holidays, the New Year and Christmas. So me and my wife went to Mexico and spent some time with her family there. And that's kind of when I had that realization of the difference between houses and storage space, and just the fact that if you have less places to hide things into, you're going to have less stuff to hide and in turn have less clutter. So I decided, I'm going to go with just a simple top. So the top, I didn't want to just slap over the whole thing here because I wanted you to see that round over edge. So I actually wanted to inset the top into the piece a little bit. So to do that, we needed to cut a concentric circle on the inside about 1 inch deep. And this jig here allows me to do that because we got 3 points of contact referencing the outside of the circle. And so that'll keep the router parallel to the outside of the circle, giving us a nice concentric inner circle. So we made it about 1 inch deep in the top here. Instead of being completely flush with the surface of the table, I wanted to sit just proud above it, and then in between the top and the base itself, there'd be this nice shadow line gap between that top and the table, giving it a nice little detail. So here I'm using Sapele for the top, and Sapele and ash is a combo that I've been using for a while now. I usually use Sapele on the base and ash on the top, but for this project I wanted to mix it up a bit, and also I had more ash than I did Sapele, so that's why we did it this way. Only thing left to do was turn this top into a circle, and we're pretty close to being done. Our dog here, Frankie, was checking up on me, making sure everything was going well. Luckily, it has been. I think if you haven't used contrasting woods before in your projects, you should give it a shot. I think it looks pretty cool. Dark and light, that kind of contrast is always nice to have. So simply just had to make another circle here. I've been doing a lot of circles lately. This project and the previous project was a circle coffee table. So been working with that shape recently a lot. We might stick with it, we might not. But yeah, a couple more things we just had to do to this project. A little bit of sanding. I did add a little round over to the top edge of the top there, just a tiny like 1/8 inch round over, just to give it a little more smoothness there. Now, like I said, I wanted the top to sit proud of the base itself, so we added these little blocks here, and I eventually came back and mounted some Z-clips through those blocks to actually secure the table to the base. I didn't film that because it's pretty simple, but yeah. So after some sanding, it's time to put the finish on. This is the finish I have been using for the past couple of projects. It's polyurethane, boiled linseed oil, and mineral spirits, equal parts of all of those things mixed up well. Wiped on, let soak in for 5-10 minutes, and then wipe off the excess. And this project did about 3 coats, not a heavy use project, so it doesn't need much. And then after all of those coats, 1 coat per day, I went back and did a wax coat. And that's something I've been doing a lot to my projects to add a little bit of more luster and shine to it. I think it looks really good. But in the end here, this project turned out very nicely, and I'm very well pleased. Again, it's a simple, elegant piece. There's no place to put a bunch of junk. There's no place to put a bunch of crap. There's just a simple tabletop to set maybe a coaster and a drink. Use the coasters, people. Protect your nice furniture and a drink, and maybe a book or two. But this will be a nice piece for your living room, right next to your sofa or your couch, or next to a nice lounge chair. But put simply, sometimes less is more, whether that's in the furniture you design or the objects and stuff you acquire throughout life along the way. So, just a little something to think about. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe if you're not already. And comment down below, what are your thoughts on that design philosophy and the project itself? If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And yeah, thank you all so much for the support. Again, I appreciate it so much. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.